Right. Am I live on the correct channel? Hello everyone. And we're live. I hope you're all well. It's been a bit of a interesting last 2 days. I was going to, well, I was last night going to cover all the amendments that were voted in the Commons. There were a lot of them. Hell, the UK Parliament stream, UK Parliament YouTube channel has a stream yesterday, and it's still on their channel. 9 hours long. That's how long this went for. Well, how long they streamed for. I think it was actually nearer to 10 hours. And it was quite interesting, really, watching the debate, because I've been watching these debates because they're so important. And to know the amendments that have been tabled, and to know what people are trying to do, which I think many could argue is sabotage Brexit. Many of those amendments certainly would constitute a validation of that, I guess. A attempt at sabotaging. Can I condense it? I am going to do something better than that. I am going to address each amendment in turn over the course of PMQs. So at random points, I'm just going to stop, mention an MP's amendment and the result of that amendment. One of them is relevant to one of the questions Jeremy Corbyn asks, and I think it's very important that we go through each of them. Needless to say, only I think two amendments actually got through. But to be honest, one of them's not even legally binding. That's pretty much it. Probably. So I think... Oh, and for those who don't like YouTube, this is being streamed directly to stream.me as well. Link below. Feel free to go there and cancel the chat up there, since I need to use it more often. I really should. I think the way some of these amendments were tabled, it was important that they were debated. I think there was a lot of very interesting results when it came to the amendments. Some were very close, and I think it's very important that now we have this belief. There is a chance that Theresa May's deal will get through Parliament now. If she can get the one thing, i.e. the backstop, removed. I apologise for the coughing, by the way. I still have a sore throat. Not sick, just a sore throat. I'm not a huge fan of Theresa May's deal. I'll readily admit that. It is vague or nebulous. Something which I guess is appropriate for her premiership. You could sum it up as nebulous. That seems quite appropriate. And some of the answers she's going to give today fall into the category of, well, nebulous quite handily, to be honest. I think with... Oh, excuse me. I think with what she has achieved, and I say achieve, well, in the sense of how she thinks it is, or what she believes anyway, she believes this deal is good for us and appeases people. No. All it does is get a majority in the House. That is very important. For her, anyway. For me, this deal's bad. Many MPs that are Brexiteers themselves say this is a bad deal. And on the table, realistically, is bad deal or no deal. And in this instance, no deal is better than the bad deal, because at least with the no deal, we're not tied to the EU and a bunch of committees that rule over everything and make us their bitch. Hit to the economy, yes, but that whole sovereign rule... Anyway, I think we should... Excuse me. We should begin. Let's pull up this chat, because I need to make sure that's there so I can see it. Oh, you grumble. There we go. Okay, right, yes. It's, oh, another interesting thing about the debate. There were a lot of interruptions. Usually you give way for points of order as well. Usually when it comes to protocol, you make a point of order and the speaker then will advise. But in debates in Parliament, it's a case of you say, will the right honourable gentleman or the right honourable lady give way? Or is it just would the right honourable give way, or would the honourable give way? Depends on if they're a member of the Privy Council, if they're right honourable or just honourable member. Honourable member. Right. That's the term, I believe. Jeremy Corbyn, Theresa May gave way quite a lot. And unsurprisingly, because he does this a lot, Jeremy Corbyn does not. And it gets a lot of... because he thinks he's making some profound point. He's not. He uses dull language because he doesn't understand the bigger words. That much is very clear with one of the answers Theresa May gives. Now, granted, her answer is by definition nebulous. But some parts do make some sense. It's just she took her time getting there. And we will get to it soon enough. I think the debates showed one thing from yesterday, and that was there is now a majority that could vote this through if the backstop is removed. And I believe Theresa May is today, after having met Jeremy Corbyn, which was after this, in fact, which, by the way, actually, you know what, we're going to talk about that first, before we even do this. Screw it, let's go back to the other scene, because it's only appropriate. So, ever since September, Jeremy Corbyn indicated he wished to speak with the Prime Minister about the deal, about what she was negotiating at the time. Now, with what she was negotiating, I kind of understood he didn't need to be there, to be honest. Oh, excuse me. He didn't need to be there, therefore, it didn't matter. He may have reached up across an olive branch in his mind, a condescending olive branch, no less, to work together to get a good deal. But at the time, it was not at all relevant. Negotiations were ongoing, and no one knew all the facts. It wasn't until the deal was presented that we know just how bad it was. When the Prime Minister first reached out, he said no unless no deal was taken off the table. Members from every other party, including backbenchers from Labour, went and met the Prime Minister. Many criticised aspects of it. And I think it's important to recognise that he refused up until yesterday, when a majority was finally sort of given that agreement that there is in fact a majority if the backstop is removed. He realised, shit. Now I actually have to work with her. So I think it's very important to note that he only got there after he suffered repeated defeats. He didn't beat her in a vote of no confidence. He himself hasn't even survived one. I bet you didn't know that. He lost one within his own party and still stayed on. That was a while back. He recovered, apparently. But he also came through it and has gotten to the point now where he is losing to a loser. He couldn't beat her in no confidence. He couldn't even get his amendment through. And his amendment we'll get to soon enough. Theresa May, yet again, by the way, did reach across and showed, I would say class, but I think we all know what it was. She beat him, so she simply repeated herself to talk to him. That was it. It makes her look like the bigger person, but in reality it doesn't at all, really, is it? It's a case of you lost. But if I look nice to you, I can be a dick to you in the office when I peg you. Anyway, I've prattled on for 10 minutes now. I do apologise. We will get to the amendments. But I want to start on this, which I've only watched once. I do apologise, but I'm not sure of all the details in this. And as far as whether or not the deal will get through or no deal will happen, it's a 50-50 right now for anything. Because the deal could still be rejected if she cannot get the backstop removed, then no deal happens. More than likely, anyway. So, excuse me, I should have a drink before I do that. I apologise. I do have a drink, though. In a camera lens cup. I have no idea why.
Toby Perkin. Number one, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that members from all sides of the House will want to join me in sending our thoughts and prayers to all those affected by the collapse of the Brumadinho Dam in Brazil. We're in touch with the local authorities and we stand ready to provide whatever support we can. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Toby Perkin. Firstly, associate myself with the comments of the Prime Minister about the tragic situation in
Christ,
Brazil.
that guy's a giant.
My son is one of thousands of young people to have their life chances transformed by their studies at Chesterfield College. The college's funding, like FE colleges across the country, is 30% down in real terms since this government came to power.
The real terms funding argument is a bit of a weird one because I don't know if it's done based on independent. This is the part I'm not too sure about, and I had looked into it once before, but I still couldn't find a definitive answer. Whether or not the funding was reduced because of austerity, or whether the funding was reduced because they originally had too much, and therefore it was means assessed as 30% less than what it originally was. And he also mentions real terms. The argument can be made then it's not down at all. It's just the inflation part that plays a factor.
Further education funding is in crisis. Why is the education of young people who go to further education colleges worth so little to this government?
Prime Minister!
That man's a fucking giant, by the way.
He could not be more wrong. It is this government, yes. It is this government that is ensuring that by 2020 the funding available...
See, that's the problem. By 2020, the party opposite like things to be done. That's how they would want to operate. Of course, when Labour are in power, they will then realise you cannot work things like that. That's not how it works. It has to be legislated. It has to be approved. It has to be voted on. It's not so simple. You can't just you can't just lie your way through it, really, can you? You can't make shit up as you go along like Tony Blair did. And on the subject of politicians lying, we could talk about the Labour MP that was jailed for lying to police to avoid a speeding ticket, called Fiona Onasanya. Yeah. Just wanted to mention that because, seriously. Liar. Anyway.
Support, the funding we're putting into further education is ensuring that we are providing the best life chances for young people who are going into further education. It is this government, it is this government that is taking steps to ensure that young people are able to take up the opportunities that are right for them. For too long in this country, the assumption has been that the only way to get on in life is to go to university.
Yeah, that certainly was the trend when I was at uni. A lot of people went just to say, I've been to uni. They had the qualification. They didn't really want to do anything with it. It's why most of them, did English literature. They didn't want to do a more... Well, they said that was the easier degree. I've seen some of the essays they did, as far as I was concerned. I like the way of operating with absolutes, in the sense that if I'm given an equation, I can solve the equation and show how I got the answer, thereby getting the maximum marks. But a lot of the people I went to uni with that got those English literature degrees got 2 1s at best, because it was virtually impossible to get a first, which I thought was just bullshit. As far as I'm concerned also, you shouldn't have to go to university to do well. Apprenticeships exist, MVQ qualifications or vocational qualifications exist. If you encourage more people to do that, work-based training, then they are in the workplace they want to be in and they are being trained to a high standard that the employer wants and will keep them on because of. Their assessment for that is, what, 2 to 3 years? I think that's more important and valuable to an employer, whereas going to university just makes you very, very book smart in a very, very specific field. You're not actually intelligent or of value unless you go into that field where you have a very, very useful set of skills that are useless anywhere else. I'm not saying that from experience at all.
And other ways, like apprenticeships and further education colleges, have not been respected in the same way. It is this government that is ensuring we have that respect for further education. It's this government that's ensuring we have the respect for technical education as well.
John Whittingdale.
I'm assuming this is the plant question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is my right honourable friend aware that last year was the worst on record for the deaths, imprisonment or hostage-taking of journalists?
Ooh, I'd feel sorrier for that if journalists had any integrity. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, any related, hostage-related death is bad. Do they know how to code, though?
With 80 across the world killed in the course of their work. Does my right friend agree that journalists fulfil a vital role in a free society? And will she ensure that every opportunity is taken to put pressure on the governments with the worst records to respect media freedom and to take action to protect international journalism?
Journalists do represent a very important sector when it comes to information and passing it off. The problem is, the language they choose to pass on the truth sullies it, muddies it, makes it impossible for any of us to actually know what is correct and not. A lot of them fob off bad news or fake news to the point where they're now downsizing. You know who I'm talking about, of course. And it is an absolute tragedy. It is an absolute tragedy that they are having to do this. However, one could argue they bring it upon themselves when the majority audience walk away because they realise, right, so you're not actually telling me the truth, you're lying to me. How's that coding working out for you? I hear Twitter was actually suspending accounts for the coding related meme. Lol.
My right honourable friend has raised a very important issue, and I certainly agree with him about the important role that a free press and journalists play in our democracies. And I'd like to thank him for raising this issue, because I know it's important to him, but many members across the House. And as he says, sadly in 2018, we saw 80 journalists being killed. 348 are currently in prison, and 60 are being held hostage around the world.
Do you think, and I have to point this out, this isn't me, oh no, it is entirely victim blaming. They knew the risks when they went to those locations. They knew this. It's terrible what has happened to them, and it's of course even worse if they are dead. But they knew what they were doing, and knew what they were getting themselves into. Granted, I would love for them to be able to report the news on what is going on in the areas they have gone to. But I'm not entirely sure if you could associate the free press, the whole free press, with those that have been taken hostage. those ones actually going out there into those dangerous areas, you know, helping the world by telling us what is going on in places that are dangerous, and equating them on par with the dogs that we have in our country, the ones that are always biting at the heels and then passing off what they believe to be an interpretation of the news as opposed to the news. It's not the same thing, really, is it?
And we're deeply concerned because these numbers, as my right honourable friend says, have risen on the previous year. That's why in 2019 we're placing our resources behind the cause of media freedom. We're helping to train journalists around the world, such as in Venezuela, where we've seen an authoritarian government suppress its critics. And this year we plan to host an international conference in London on media freedom, bringing together countries who believe in this cause to mobilise an international consensus behind the protection of journalists. This is an important issue. This government is putting its weight behind it.
Venezuela's doing such a good job right now, don't you think? I mean, so good. So good. I mean, they're just showing how successful socialism is, when all you've got to rely on for money is the crudest of oil that is virtually impossible, within cost, of course, to refine and make a profit off or use.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join the Prime Minister in sending support to the victims of the Brumadinho Dam collapse in Brazil, and I'm very pleased that all support is being offered to the authorities there to try and deal with that crisis. Mr. Speaker, following the vote in the House last night against no deal, the Prime Minister is again going to attempt to renegotiate the backstop on the basis of finding alternative arrangements. Could she set out today what these alternative arrangements might be?
Before she answers the question, we should, of course, know what the amendment is. Where is it? Okay. The amendment was by Tory MP Spellman. It was the No Deal amendment. It was passed by 318 votes to 310, a majority of 8 people. The amendment stated that the UK will not leave the EU without a deal. And this, much like the referendum vote actually, is only advisory and has no legislative force. Therefore, it cannot be legally bound. Mostly because you can't take no deal off the table, because if you have no deal, then no deal happens. Excuse me. Dry cough. The worst kind.
Mr.
Well, absolutely. Last night the House set a clear direction on the way that the House could agree a deal, and that is about dealing, as the Right Honourable Gentleman says, with the issue of the backstop. As I said yesterday, there are a number of proposals for how that could be done. We're engaging positively with proposals that have been put forward by my right honourable friend, the member for Loughborough, and my honourable friends, the members for North West Hampshire, Wickham and North East Somerset.
The fact that she hasn't actually mentioned... I am drinking Nemsip. The fact that she hasn't mentioned what those are, although she mentioned North East Somerset, we all know who the constituent, whose constituency that is. Cough, cough. Mog. Cough, cough. But she hasn't said what they are, which is going to rile the party opposite.
Others, including my honourable friend, the member for Altrincham and Sale West, have put forward other proposals, such as a unilateral exit mechanism. And I'm just telling the Shadow Foreign Secretary, she listens. A point of advice, if she wants to shout things, it might be to shout them in response to what I'm saying, rather than just saying... They put forward proposals such as unilateral exit mechanism or a time limit to the backstop, and the political declaration already...
A unilateral mechanism, I have no idea, by the way, what that means, but a time limit to the backstop is an important one, because I think with if the backstop was ever implemented, I think there needs to be a case that we need to know when that ends, but something has to exist if the backstop is no more. If implemented in the first place, that is.
Ready references alternative arrangements and raises a number of issues that can be proposals that can be addressed, such as mutual recognition of trusted trader schemes.
Jeremy Corbyn!
The fuck is a trusted trader scheme?
None of that was very clear to me. I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure unilateral mechanism confused the fuck out of you as well.
But it would have been nice, Mr. Speaker, it would have been really nice if the Prime Minister had acknowledged that she did whip her MPs to try and support no deal and was defeated on that.
By 8 votes, Jeremy. 8. Oh, and yes, I will agree, her answer was nebulous.
And, Mr. Speaker, the EU said at the weekend they're willing to renegotiate if the government's red lines could change.
Okay, so before you ask this question, the red lines existed as a means of us saying, this is what we're going to negotiate on, and this is where we're not going to move while we negotiate. Because if we don't have a position or a stance, then we are giving more power to the EU when it comes to negotiating. So the red lines that existed for a good reason. Because otherwise we would have been taken advantage of even more than we already are by the deal that is now on the table. I think that's important to mention, because this constant scapegoating of the red lines is a retarded position. If you or Keir Starmer were negotiating, there is no way you can tell me you would have gone in and simply let them walk all over you. You would want the best deal for the UK, along with your comprehensive and permanent customs union. It's just not going to happen. It's just one of those silly little things that really gets under my skin, I think, now. Because it's not a valid argument. You have to have them. Everyone does when you negotiate anything.
Could the Prime Minister today set out which of her red lines are going to change?
Prime Minister!
Does anyone actually know what her red lines are to begin with?
Been absolutely clear with my contacts with European Union leaders is that they want a deal. What this House voted for last night is to leave the European Union with a deal, but it also crucially showed what it will take to see a support in this House for a deal in the future. I think the plan that was set out last night shows that we can obtain a substantial and a sustainable majority in this House. But the right honourable gentleman talks about not being clear about positions on various things.
Yeah, this is where he's going to fob this off. I know it is PMQ, and he doesn't have to say shit, and that's why he never does. But I'm starting to think the reason he doesn't is because he does not have a position. Because he himself has nothing.
I'm very pleased that he is now going to. I'm very pleased he's now going to meet with me. And there are a number of issues that I want to discuss with him. For example, he talks about a strong single market relationship with the European Union in the future. But he also. I want to know whether that means he wants to accept all EU state aid rules, for example, because in the past he's objected to state aid rules, and he can't.
Sorry. Part of me has a thought. Technically, he doesn't have to answer this. Of course he doesn't. It's PMQ, not opposition ministers' questions. So, OMQ. I apologise. But there is a possibility that answers to these questions could be pressed for when you met him after this, which would have been earlier today.
Can't have it both ways. So we need to know with greater clarity what it is the right honourable gentleman believes in, and perhaps next time one of his own backbenchers wants to ask him about his position on a second referendum, he'll actually take a question and an intervention from him.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because actually during the debate yesterday, he gave a statement and he refused to give way to one of his own backbenchers. And when backbenchers and ministers in his party voted against his amendment and voted in favour for amendments he didn't want to get through, he was, well, it's alleged that he said that he, what did he do? Oh yeah, he would be punishing those ministers that voted against. To be honest, anything that goes against what he thinks ends with MPs getting fired or not supported or selected for re-election. He's not authoritarian, everyone. He can take criticism. Thank you, Tedare, to help with your SARS. Much appreciated.
Mr. Speaker, last time I looked at the order paper, it said Prime Minister's question time. And the Prime Minister has herself, and I quote, the only possible deal was within her red line.
Oh. Thank you, Ghost of Saki, for that. Where is the text-to-speech? It's not happening. Killed them all, though.
So it's perfectly reasonable to ask which of her red lines has changed. This morning, the Brexit Secretary was asked, and I quote, what is the alternative to the backstop? He replied, well, that's what we're exploring. Can the Prime Minister tell us which options are being explored?
She did actually answer that in the first question with the unilateral mechanism and the time limit to the backstop. So she can easily say, with a very short answer, which she's going to say anyway.
I think I listed them in answer to one of the earlier questions the right honourable gentleman gave me. Perhaps also, if he listens to the answers to the questions, he wouldn't have to repeat the question.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Looking forward to meeting the Prime Minister later on today.
And having some squeaky bum sex.
Because I want to put forward Labour's alternatives, which could command a majority in this House.
Nobody would support a access to single market and customs union because it wouldn't get through the EU. It could get through the Parliament, but the EU would not accept it because that is cherry-picking aspects of the EU or the European Union that you want to be a part of, which they've already said you can't do.
And are about protecting jobs and the people's living standards across this country. Mr. Speaker, this morning the Brexit Minister said that alternative arrangements means looking at technology. Very interesting question. So can the Prime Minister be very clear what technological advances is she expecting to be made in the next 58 days?
Cold fusion.
Prime Minister!
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, it would be helpful.
I want to hear about these matters. The Prime Minister.
The right honourable gentleman, I have pointed out that there are a number of options that people are putting forward that we are working with them on and working positively with them on. I've already referenced a number of things that are in the political declaration on alternative arrangements that do set out various aspects that could be looked at. I referenced one of them in my answer to his question earlier. But what I would also say to the right honourable gentleman is that last night the House did vote to reject no deal. But it also voted to do what the European Union has consistently asked this House to do since it rejected the withdrawal agreement, which was to say what it was that the UK wanted to see change. Last night, a majority in this House voted to maintain the commitment to no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, to leave the European Union with a deal, and to set out to the European Union what it will take to ensure that this House can support a deal. That is a change to the backstop. That is what I will be taking back to the European Union. That is what we will be doing to ensure that we can avoid no deal. He stands up regularly and says he doesn't want no deal. I'm working to ensure we get a deal. He has opposed every move by this government to get a deal. He's the one who's risking no deal.
Right. Excuse me. Now it'd be good to point out which of the amendments they're talking about. Let's see. The official... sorry. You have... Oh, where is it? You have the Brady Amendment, which was passed by 317 to 301. This is Graham Brady, who is chair of the 1922 committee and the voice of the Tory backbenchers. He was also the guy that announced the vote of the in-party vote of no confidence on Theresa May. It's an attempt to make the backstop more palatable. It says that it should be replaced with alternative arrangements to avoid a hard border. Once again, this is something the EU has ruled out. The government has indicated that it will whip MPs to back the amendment, which, if passed, would allow May to go to Brussels with a clear sign from MPs of what they want to get a deal through Parliament. Where's the other one? Nope. Backstop amendment. That's not it. Oh, Jesus Christ. Nope. The rest are nonsense. We'll get to those later.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, I would be grateful if the Prime Minister would actually acknowledge that the House has voted to take no deal off the table.
Advisory, not legal.
And can she assure the House that if she is unable to secure any legal changes to the backstop, that she would work to find a solution based on a comprehensive customs union, a strong single market deal, and the guaranteeing of rights and protection?
None of all, in fact, are possible because the EU has said you cannot cherry pick, you fuckhead.
Rather than go back to the alternative that she's been threatening everybody with for months and months, which was to crash out without any deal whatsoever.
It's not crashing out, it's leaving without a deal. That's it.
Prime Minister!
Last night the House did vote to reject no deal, but that cannot be the end of the story. The only way, the right honourable gentleman says, of course not. I think that's the first time he's actually accepted that you can't just vote to reject no deal. You have to vote for a deal. Otherwise, you leave with no deal. So far, he has opposed everything this government has put forward in relation to a deal. And he said previously he will reject any deal that the government puts on the table. Will he now? He says it's Prime Minister's questions, but people want to know his position as well. Will he ensure that if this government comes back with a revised deal that ensures we don't leave with no deal, he will actually support it?
It really is time, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister acknowledge she's got to move on from the red lines she's put down in the first place.
Or you could, maybe just quickly say to her, okay, now what? Answer her question and just say, now what?
And he doesn't acknowledge that in answers to my questions, or indeed anybody else's.
Interesting thing with the backstop at the border. Neither side want a border. But a border already exists. People think this will destroy the Good Friday Agreement, but it won't. Even Irish and Northern Irish ministers have said this won't. It's being really put on a pedestal by people who just want to make a point, to virtue signal on it. I'm more inclined to believe the Irish and Northern Irish ministers over these idiots, and all the idiots in this room. Okay, all but the Irish and Northern Irish ministers, anyway. Although they are just DUP, Sinn Féin refuse to sit in their seats.
Mr. Speaker, our responsibility is to bring people together. Whether they vote...
LOL.
Mr. Speaker, we are the Houses of Parliament. We are the House of Commons. We do represent the entire country. And the point I'm making is we should bring people together whether they voted leave or remain. And indeed, I look forward to meeting the Prime Minister to discuss a solution that could, in my view, unite the country.
You're not going to unite the country. And I do think if a wall was built, which won't be, but if there was one built, perhaps use it as a staging ground for a prototype for Trump's wall. Less space, it covers less area, you get to try it out. That'd be kind of cool. It also, it's worth noting, while you want to unite the country, which you won't be able to do, you do for the many, not the few, but you alienate a large part of the country, therefore you can't unite them. And I also think that that's not the point now. We are at the stage where those that need to be united are in the very chamber you reside in and have worked in as a career. That is what the Prime Minister is focused on, not on the people. Because that would mean going to the people with the deal, which I think you're trying to do to stonewall her.
Changes to the backstop alone will not be sufficient. Businesses and trade unions are very clear that any solution must involve a customs union and the strongest possible deal with a single market to avoid the damage of no deal. The Prime Minister may have possibly temporarily united her party, but is she willing?
Well, she certainly united them when it came to not having a vote of confidence win.
Mr. Speaker, is...
Order! Order! Mr. Ellis. You were at one time a barrister of one rank or another in the courts. There is no way that you would have been allowed to shout from a sedentary position in that way, and the judge would have ruled you out. I don't know whether that's why you stopped practicing law and came into Parliament. Behave yourself, young man. You can do so much better when you try. Jeremy Corbyn.
Speaker, as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted. The Prime Minister may have succeeded in temporarily uniting her very divided party. But, Mr. Speaker, is she willing to make compromises necessary that are more important, and that is to unite the country on a going forward to secure jobs and living standards right across the UK?
Okay, this is a bit of a loaded question, because the only way to realistically secure jobs, the economy, is to stay in the EU. For now, anyway. It is a failing project at this point. It's already starting to fall apart and you could certainly attribute the rise of populism in Europe. It helps. Also, the economic crashes that have happened because of countries that have joined that have not been sufficiently vetted. But that is the answer. But we're leaving. Therefore, the only way to secure them is to get the best deal from the EU, which this deal does not, or go with no deal and secure deals as quickly as humanly possible.
Prime Minister!
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, he's a fine one to talk about coming together when it was only last night that he agreed to actually meet me to talk about these issues. And he said he's time and time again, he's told me to listen to the views of the House. He's just stood up and said the backstop is not the only issue in the withdrawal agreement. Last night, the House voted by a majority to say that the issue that needed to be addressed was the backstop. So he needs to listen to the House and to recognise that. And his proposal last night, he put forward a proposal last night which referenced the customs union and the single market, and his proposal was rejected by this House.
His amendment, which is actually the very first one I have written, it is where is it? Scroll up. Here we go. The official Labour amendment. It was defeated by a majority of 31, so 327 votes in favour that defeated it to 296. It was backed by a series of front benchers, and this pushed the party policy of avoiding no deal and instead seeking a form of customs union. This has been rejected. And yet he continues to say that a customs union and single market access would command a majority. Well, apparently, by 31, you are incorrect. Excuse me. There was a... where is it? There was Amendment C to it, and in various ways called for a second referendum, but they were not selected. This amendment was not selected. There were other amendments that weren't selected, and I'll certainly go through them quickly, but they do kind of repeat themselves. But we will see later anyway.
But I'll tell him what this government has been doing. Over the last week, we've been getting more teachers into schools. We've been ensuring we're giving more money to councils. We won a majority on Brexit. What did he manage? His Brexit plan was voted down. He opposed ending free movement, and he won't rule out a second referendum. He's no plan for Brexit, no good plan for our economy, and no plan for our country.
Now might be a good time then, before we get to Ian Blackford, the paper molester, to go through amendments A, O, G, B, J, I, and N. So yes, Eog Bjin. A was the Labour amendment, which we just covered. Yvette Cooper's was B. It was to extend Article 50. It was one of the most scrutinised amendments, and was backed by 70 MPs originally. This would guarantee parliamentary time for a private member's bill drafted by Cooper that would extend Article 50 to the end of 2019 if Theresa May failed to secure a deal by late February. Right? It was scuppered. Defeated by 321 votes to 298. The next was Dominic Grieve's amendment, Amendment G. This idea was by the former Attorney General, and it would allow Parliament to take control in creating a series of indicative votes by decreeing that a motion put forward by a minority of 300 MPs from at least 5 parties excuse me, would be debated as the first item for MPs in the Commons the next day. This amendment was defeated by 321 to 301, 20 majority. I was Spellman's the No Deal amendment. J was extending Article 50. That was defeated, much like Yvette Cooper's. N was the Brady amendment that we earlier discussed. O was the SNP Plaid Cymru amendment. This notes that the Scottish and Welsh Assemblies also voted overwhelmingly to reject the Prime Minister's deal, calling for an extension of Article 50 and no deal being removed as an option. This was defeated by... Okay. This was defeated by 327 votes to 39. Quite the majority, I think we can all agree. Now, the amendments not selected and or withdrawn was the second referendum Amendment C, the main Liberal Democrat amendment, Amendment D. This would create a committee of no more than 70 MPs based on representation in the Commons to lead on all Brexit matters in Parliament. Okay. E was a backstop amendment by Andrew Merson of the Conservative Party. This would have decreed that the Irish backstop, if it came into force, would expire at the end of 2021, which the EU has said it will not agree to. F was the indicative vote amendment. It was tabled by Hilary Benn, not selected. H, the Citizens' Assembly Amendment. We spoke about this last week, of a 250-strong Citizens' Assembly. A Yes, send Semit. A representative but randomly selective group to devise possible ways to move forward on Brexit. Yep. KLM. Yep. They were John Barron's backstop amendments, mostly about exploration and the unilateral UK withdrawal. P, another indicative vote, and Q, put forward by two SNP MPs, Brendan McNeil and Pete Wishart, called for Article 50 to be revoked, which obviously failed miserably. Not that it matters now, really. I should link this in the description when we're done, so you can, if you want, go through it. The way these are selected is by the Speaker of the House. He has selected a number of these bills, though, that are the same as others. So, yes, more time is spent debating one than the other. I don't tend to agree with any of them, because they try to take the power away from government. They try and extend the time to negotiate. They try and get a customs union, call for a second referendum. It's just... and the no deal thing, which is just stupid, really, isn't it? Anyway, let's do the next question and then get to the SNP.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First-time buyer numbers, which collapsed under the last Labour government, are now at a 10-year high thanks to initiatives like Help to Buy and the first-time buyer stamp duty cut.
It's important to note that house building was an issue when it came to people buying homes. The economic crash of 2008 did not help. The fact austerity had to happen. It's quite important to acknowledge there weren't those schemes then as well, so it's a different circumstance to encourage more people to buy their homes. I think it's worth pointing out. Times change and so do circumstances.
But there are still many people in their 20s and 30s who want to buy their own home. Will the Prime Minister join me in asking local authorities to use their existing powers when they grant planning consents to make sure that as many properties as possible are designated as starter homes or discount market sales homes to help those people in their 20s and 30s realise the dream of home ownership?
I have to admit, as someone in their 30s, I don't really care if I own a home or not. And yeah, no one can afford to buy a house. It does depend on region. There are articles I saw recently indicating where the cheapest homes were. And they're cheap, and the cost of living is cheap because there's no work there as well. How do you do anything if there's nothing there for you to do? But dry cough is so fucking irritating. I'll probably have to put off recording tonight until tomorrow after this. I do think the desire to own a home, I guess it depends on the individual. Or the majority, of course, that want to own a home.
My honourable friend raises an important issue, not only in pointing out the very good news that we see that 10-year high in the number of first-time buyers, but also the opportunities that are available for local authorities to provide for this. And we obviously are clear that the planning system has a key role in delivering more affordable homes, and the National Planning Policy Framework, revised last year, was central to this. It includes a wider definition of affordable housing, and local authorities are...
Wait, wider definition? I hope that doesn't include, oh well, we'll add to this price range.
Expected to consider the new definition which includes what my honourable friend has referenced, starter homes and discounted market sales homes, to identify the types of affordable housing their communities need. And there's an expectation that major developments will make a minimum of 10% of homes available for affordable ownership, including starter homes and discounted market sales homes. So we've made good progress on first-time buyers. There's more for us to do, and this government is doing it.
Ian Blackford.
Everyone prepare your paper. The fiddler's here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister told this House to vote down this deal
There it is.
in the hope of going back to Brussels and negotiating an alternative deal. No such alternative deal exists.
I think he
Yet last
molested
night,
it.
she told the House she will go back to Brussels and seek an alternative arrangement. So what is it? Has the Prime Minister inadvertently misled the House?
Oh, he saved this question. If he said, has the Prime Minister misled the House, it would have caused another uproar, which has happened before. Because honestly, he's done it in the past, and he had to add the word inadvertently, because if he didn't, he would have been kicked out of the House.
Or has this government's incompetence reached a whole new level?
Prime Minister.
A very simple fact that the right honourable gentleman appears to have omitted in what he's saying is that the deal was brought to the House, and the House of Commons rejected that deal. Therefore, we look to say what can be changed, what can we take back to Brussels, what can we fight for to ensure that the deal can get the support of this House. But I'd also like to take the opportunity. I was going to respond to the right honourable gentleman's point of order last night, but unfortunately, when I looked, he'd left, I think, to go and do a Sky News interview, because I have to say to him, I want to just confirm absolutely the commitment of this government to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And the remarks the right honourable gentleman made last night in relation to that were frankly irresponsible.
He made a point about how basically Ian Blackford was saying that if we voted for the deal, if the deal got through, if we left the EU, the backstop happened, it would tear up the Good Friday Agreement. That's what he said. I remember this because Nigel Dodd of the DUP basically said, yeah, Ian Blackford doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. And many MPs from Ireland have said this. Or Northern Ireland, to be more specific. And I think it's important you recognise that, because people using it as a position to make some kind of grandstanding point have no leg to stand on if all they're trying to do is have Article 50 revoked.
Order. The right honourable gentleman has a right to be heard. The public would expect him to be heard, and he will be heard. And attempts to shout him down are not just rude, they are irresponsible, they are undemocratic, and they should certainly not have the sanction of anyone who sits on the Treasury bench. Stop it. It's low grade, it's useless, and it won't work. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That was a
Chunky.
graceless response from the Prime Minister, who is acting with sheer irresponsibility. And I have to say in her answer, what she demonstrated is, here are my principles. If you don't like them, you can have some more. Mr. Speaker, last night a majority of Scottish MPs rejected Brexit. The Scottish Parliament...
But they were outvoted.
The Welsh Assembly and this House...
Order. Stop it. It's utterly irresponsible, chanting in the background. Let the right honourable gentleman ask his question and the Prime Minister answer it. That is what the public would expect. Ian Blackford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Fiddle.
The Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Assembly and this House of Commons has rejected the Prime Minister's deal.
Yep.
The UK government told Scotland in 2014 being part of the UK meant continued EU membership.
But times change, and the rest of the UK just wanted to fuck you. Sorry, fuck with you. Freudian slip and everything.
The UK government told us we'd be part of a family of equal nations. Prime Minister...
You are equal. It's why you were outvoted.
Scotland wants to stay in the EU.
But you've lost. You lost, you muppet. You got outvoted in a democracy in the United Kingdom Parliament. You got outvoted in the rest of the United Kingdom. Yes, you don't want to leave. Nor did Northern Ireland. But they're still leaving.
We are scunnered by this government ignoring Scotland. Prime Minister, do you accept that you've promised Scotland everything, you've delivered nothing?
Oh, please. You got more devolved powers. You're just fucking... Oh, you're such a dickhead. Ah, dear. I know you're a devolved administration. I know you have your powers. But you, Mr. Blackford, are in the United Kingdom's Parliament. If this fucks you off so much, why don't you fuck off back to Scotland and work in Holyrood instead? Honestly.
Prime Minister!
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, Scotland is part of the United Kingdom. It voted in 2014 to stay part of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom will be leaving the European Union. But if the right honourable gentleman wants to talk about the impact of Scotland in the future, perhaps he should look at the latest figures that came out just this morning on exports. Over 60% of Scotland's exports go to the rest of the UK. That's more than Scotland's trade with the rest of the world, and over 3 times more than with the rest of the European Union. And yet he represents a party that wants to erect a border between Scotland and England. The biggest threat to the future of Scotland is sitting on those benches.
I fully support a wall existing between England and Scotland, if only to stop us the English from killing the Scottish and taking all their whiskey. As far as I'm concerned, the SNP are a joke. They ask bullshit questions and waste our time. My apologies for the coughing, by the way. Anyway, I am going to get some sleep. I would say, if you have any questions, please ask, but I think I need to sleep, and then I'll record... Dankula's fucked. I think I'll record tomorrow morning, and then hopefully have that video out for tomorrow morning as well. So thank you all very much for joining. I hope you all have a lovely evening, and thank you all for listening.